Welcome to Critical Wade Theory. And today we're going to be looking again at a creepy movie. And that's partly because it's the Halloween season. In fact, today it is Halloween Day. But also, it's the sort of movie I might review anyway. So I'm looking at a weird, whirling coffin of a film, a low budget fever dream that launched 1,000 nightmares. I'm talking about Phantasm, the 1979 cult horror film that might be the strangest franchise starter of its era. Written, directed, produced, shot, and edited by one man, Don Coscarelli, is the definition of a one man show. And what he pulled off on a $300,000 budget is nothing short of legendary. And this movie is fun. It's also genuinely odd. It's got eerie elements to it. So Phantasm isn't your average horror flick. It's not a slasher, it's not a haunted house story. It's a surrealistic sci-fi horror blend that feels like someone recorded a nightmare on VHS. And even though it's technically a 70s movie, any movie that comes out in like 78 or 79, it's got a little bit of a 1980s thing going on with it as well. Especially when it's 1979, you could kind of claim that it's crossing over into 80s territory at that point. And this story centers on Mike, a teenage boy who's just lost his brother's friend under very strange circumstances. What starts as grief soon spirals into something far more bizarre. Mike becomes obsessed with the local mortuary run by a towering, sinister undertaker simply known as the Tall Man. And as far as I can recall, that's mostly what he's known as in this movie. In the later entries in this franchise, he actually gets more of a full identity, like a full name of back when he was a human. But here he's definitely more of a supernatural and dreamlike villain. And he's played by the unforgettable Angus Scrim. The tall man isn't just burying bodies, he's reanimating them, compressing them into dwarf sized slaves, and sending them off to another dimension. Yep, that's the plot. And he does shape shifting. He assumes the identities of other people, including a let's just face it, a sexy blonde woman that seduces lonely, horny, pathetic dudes, and seems to just do bad stuff to them, kill them, kind of stuff. And that's it's it's not a very elaborate story, really, although it does build a universe. So it's kind of a contradiction there to have a story that's so simple, yet you're constructing sort of an alternate universe. And Mike teams up with his older brother Jody and their friend Reggie, who, by the way, sells ice cream and also fights evil, to take the tall man down, or at least try. So, as far as the key elements here that make it a cult classic, you can start with the tall man himself. Tall, cold, otherworldly, and I was just a little off with his slick funeral attire and booming catchphrase, "You play a good game, boy, but the game is finished. Now you die." That was my bad impression of the tall man, but it wasn't that bad for a novice, somebody who is not trained in the arts of Angus Scrim. But anyway, the tall man became an instant horror icon. He doesn't need gore or quips, although he does have some of those, but he also exists on pure menace as well. The premise is mostly his menace, honestly. Like you don't know when he's going to show up exactly, but it seems like he could appear out of any corner. And there's the film's most famous murder weapon, the flying silver spheres. And at one point, I thought they actually had a name, but I struggle to find an actual name for them. They're just known as spheres or orbs. They float silently through the mausoleum or wherever the tall man sends them, and they sprout blades and drills, and they slam into their victims' skulls. It's gory, it's weird, and frankly, it's pretty unforgettable. It's one of the reasons this film and the franchise are successful, because you have some components of the story that you will remember, probably. And the tone has, there's a lot of pure nightmare logic going on here. Phantasm doesn't obey narrative rules. Characters drift in and out of dreams. Reality folds in on itself. And by the end, you're not sure what was real or if any of it was. It's sort of like the original Nightmare on Elm Street in a way, only this was actually before Freddy. So I'm sure you have some people out there who would accuse Wes Craven and, the Nightmare on Elm Street series of actually ripping Phantasm off in some ways. And, I could kind of understand that critique, even though I'm actually, a big Freddy fan. You have to give the tall man credit because he was there before Freddy. And, that was sort of his his original stomping ground was the human consciousness. He was the one who was at that place first. And I suppose you could also look at Rosemary's Baby as being another film franchise that was originated largely in the human psyche, because it is, it's partly a psychological thriller, and well, largely a psychological thriller. I don't know why I said partly, but this movie is definitely different from Rosemary's Baby. I mean, it's got some very different story elements going on. The dreamlike atmosphere would feel right at home next to David Lynch's Eraserhead, but Coscarelli wasn't imitating, he was innovating. And there was a bit of a DIY spirit, which is another reason this movie has plenty of fans. The wild part is that Coscarelli wasn't just writing and directing, he was behind the camera, in the editing room, and probably sweeping the floor between takes. And that DIY aesthetic isn't just impressive, it really helps define the movie. It's gritty, homemade, and all the more haunting for it. And I think horror fans tend to appreciate those kind of movies sometimes more than big studio productions. And the film's effects might not be the most polished, but they're inventive, and a perfect example of style over budget, and that style became its signature. And Phantasm didn't end with one movie, of course, it launched a 5 film franchise. There's Phantasm 2 in 1988, Phantasm 3 Lord of the Dead from 94, Phantasm 4 Oblivion in 98, and Phantasm Ravager in 2016. Now, I'm not going to promise you're going to like all of these films, or even this one for that matter, but they're worth checking out just for how odd they are. And, this film was around for, or this franchise was around for nearly 4 decades of chrome spheres and tall man terror. So, through it all, Reggie Bannister, yes, the Ice Cream Man, remained the soul of the series. As he put it, Coscarelli wrote this character to be every guy's guy, every man's friend, the guy that would throw himself on the flames at the door of hell to save a friend. And you feel that in the original film and in the sequels. Phantasm also stars Michael Baldwin and Bill Thornbury, not to, you know, leave them out of it. And the series never worried about explaining itself. It kept its dream logic intact and doubled down on the weirdness. And that might be part of what makes this movie so trippy. It's not it's not attempting to be normal and to appeal to everybody. So J.J. Abrams is a fan. He helped restore the original in 4K and named Captain Phasma in Star Wars: The Force Awakens after those silver or those iconic silver spheres, whatever you want to call them. And you have to wonder about what could have been with this, you know, franchise. Is there a Tall Man comic series? I haven't heard about that. Or a novelization? Imagine an animated Phantasm series on Adult Swim with Reggie still chasing down Tall Man minions in a shifting dreamscape. That could be fun to see. And I was just watching Angus Scrimm's Aqua Teen Hunger Force promos that he recorded back in the day, and those were hilarious. Speaking of Adult Swim, so it seems like there could have been potential for more than just movies. I mean, right now as I speak, there is the Pennywise TV show that's out on Paramount Plus and I think HBO Max. Well, I don't know if they both have it, but I watched the first episode yesterday and it was fun. I mean, it does kind of make you wonder, like, what are Pennywise's powers? What are his limits? Because Pennywise definitely has a lot of powers, but so does the Tall Man. All of these different characters, you have sort of dreamlike aspects to them, and you wonder where does the dream end and reality begin? What weaknesses do they actually have? Like Freddy Krueger could obviously be defeated numerous times, and so could the Tall Man. But it seems like the rules are pretty flexible when it comes to these types of villains. And Angus Scrimm passed on, of course, but the character is eternal. He'll live on through these wonderful and weird films. Well, I'm not going to say they're all equally wonderful, and it's up to you to decide which stories would be your favorite. But I think you could, if you're going to watch any one of these movies, you might as well start with the original one. And the mythos is rich for spin offs, like I said, maybe even an origin story that's a little bit more in depth. Although, I guess the problem there is that, of course, Angus Scrimm has died, so it would almost have to be like animated or something like that. And you could also maybe have a different dimensions tall man. So there's a whole world left unexplored. And I would say Phantasm isn't tidy, it doesn't hold your hand, and it's definitely not a polished studio horror film. But that's its power. It's horror boiled down to mood, mystery, and madness. So if you're into horror that makes you ask, wait, what the hell did I just watch? This could be your jam. It's weird, it's rough, and again, it's unforgettable. So, keep an eye on the silver spheres and whatever you do, don't trust the tall man. He'll he'll be right there somewhere in the background just watching you. So, thanks for listening to this episode. You can subscribe, hit a like button, and I'm sure I'll be looking at more strange and surreal corners of genre cinema and I'll do other episodes about other topics like social critiques or whatever. And I'm working on crafting some book review type of content, although I just don't get around to that. And if you've got a theory about what dimension the tall man really came from, feel free to let me know. Until next time, stay weird and stay watching.